The General Prabowo, who has a real chance to be elected president, is the single most notorious massacre general in Indonesia. He has been associated with more mass killings of civilians than any other officer. He is also the officer who was the closest protege of the U.S. government, working directly during his career with the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency and U.S. Special Forces. He told me this in 2001 when we had two long discussions between adversaries. His statements about how he brought in U.S. troops into Indonesia and how they used the opportunity in Indonesia to do what he called recon for the invasion contingency. Namely, they used the chance that Prabowo gave them to make contingency plans for a theoretical potential U.S. invasion of Indonesia in the future. That claim of his was backed up by Pentagon documents. And Prabowo said to me, I was the Americans' fair-haired boy. He was Washington's man in Jakarta for decades. But after General Suharto, who had consolidated his power by massacring anywhere from from 400,000 to 1 million civilians with direct U.S. support, after Suharto was finally ousted in a democratic uprising in '98, General Prabowo was no longer useful to Washington, and they just dumped him overnight after he lost an internal power struggle with another general. Now, Prabowo, who has been associated with at least 2 coup attempts, and who told me when I spoke to him years ago that Indonesia was not ready for democracy, and that he dreamed about seizing power and being called a fascist dictator. He now has a real chance to win the presidency. There's a great irony here, because if this does turn out to be a close election, as I believe it will, there's a chance that it's the very victims of General Prabowo and their families, their descendants, the descendants of their families, and those who admire the brave struggle of many of these victims. They could be the ones who end up giving Prabowo the victory, because President Jokowi, who defeated Prabowo the last time around in 2014, has disappointed the activist community. He said he would bring many of these generals, mass murdering generals, to trial. He didn't. He's clearly afraid of the army. He has brought some of these generals, like Hendro Priyono and Wiranto, into his circle to, according to his theory, protect him from the rest of the army, which he doesn't really have control over. And so, in their disappointment, many activists are talking about golput, essentially abstaining from voting. And there are indications that this golput vote or non-vote could be rather significant. And if it's close, it could put Prabowo over the top.